In this video, you will learn how you can implement any AI model in your application. And the great thing is, it starts off completely for free during development. And this is true. With GitHub Models, you can develop with models like DeepSeek R1, GPT-4o, and other state-of-the-art language models. So grab some coffee and we're going to head into it. The first thing you want to do is simply browse over to github.com/marketplace/models, and you just need a regular free GitHub account to get started. In here, you can select any modern model that there is. So for example, I can select GPT-4o and get started with chatting. The great thing is, you can also easily compare different language models with each other by clicking the compare button and, for example, selecting, how about DeepSeek R1? So for example, if I now ask a question such as, what is the capital of France? You will see that on both sides, it's going to immediately start generating an answer to this question. Of course, there's a difference here. On the left, we're using a non-reasoning model, which makes sense for a simple question like this. And on the right, we see that DeepSeek R1 is thinking very deeply about this question. So in this case, because it's such a simple question, you might want to go for GPT-4o. But if you have a use case where more thinking is required, then using a reasoning model like DeepSeek R1 could be a great option for you. So this is already showing you the power of GitHub Models. You can very easily compare different models with each other. But what if you want to actually implement these models? This is where most videos stop. They don't really show you how to do this properly, but I will. Well, the first step is to check the instructions for the model that you're most interested in. So let's say that we do actually want to go for GPT-4o. We can click on Use this model to get some initial instructions. So there's, of course, a variety of programming languages out there. This tutorial is going to focus on Python because it's basically the most used AI programming language. But if you're developing a web application, you can go for JavaScript or even something completely different like C#. But regardless of which method you use, you will need what's called a personal access token. This will allow you to query the models with certain rate limits that allow you to develop them in your own application. And for production needs, you will need to move to Azure AI. But you will actually see that the rate limits that you get are quite lenient and will allow you to build out your application and even have some test users before you need to dedicate to an Azure subscription. So the GitHub personal access token usage is completely free. How does it work? The first thing that we need to do is create a personal access token. To do that, we go to our profile, click on settings. Then we can scroll down here, go to developer settings, personal access tokens, and create a new fine-grained token. Now, the great thing is you just need a regular token. You don't even need any specific permissions. So I'm just going to call this LLM_token. And then I'm going to set the expiration to 30 days because I'm going to delete this token right after this video is done recording for safety purposes. And that's all you need to do. Just create the token without any extra permissions. Again, you can see a big part of the secret here, but it's expired by the time you see this. So no need to try anything fancy. We're just going to go ahead and copy that token. And then we're going to use this token in a special small code repository that I've provided that will allow you to implement these language models easily in whatever application you might have. So let's have a look at that code. In this code file, I define a fast API server in Python. Why am I doing that? Well, if your service or application is currently written in Python, you can take this template and basically move over a lot of the code. But if your service is not written in Python, you can still launch this application as a microservice running next to your regular application that can handle all the AI workload. The great part about this application is that it plugs into GitHub Models directly and is free to get started with. How does it work? Well, we basically have one endpoint. The endpoint is /chat completions/stream. This allows users to query the API and get a streamed response back. So they don't have to wait for the entire response to be generated. They can get the response as it's coming in, just like what you saw in the GitHub UI before. And they can request different types of models. In this example code, the model that they can call is an open string because the amount of models that GitHub Models might support will change in the future. But you can, of course, constrict this further if you know that your application works best with, say, GPT-4o. At this point, we just allow the user to pass in any model string, whether it's valid or not. It will return an error if that's not the case. Of course, we've got some scaffolding code here to handle the different messages. We want to make sure that the user can also specify a system message. Here too, you could change the code and have a hard-coded system message if you want your system to act in a certain way. It's super easy to customize all of this. And then, of course, we create the actual request. Now, the client that we're using relies on that personal access token we created earlier. So it basically calls this get OpenAI client method and then searches your operating system environment variables for GitHub token. I've actually defined that token in this .env file. I'm not going to show you that, but I will show you the .env example file. So it just contains this GitHub token equals content, and you can paste the personal access token right after that. And you want to have this in a separate .env file so that when you, for example, change this into a Git project, you don't commit that secret, right? That's a very important thing to take into consideration. So we have those elements in place. And then, of course, whenever it gets a piece of the response from the language model, it will return that chunk. And you will see this in action very soon. So don't worry if this is new to you. So how do we actually get the server up and running? Well, it's quite trivial. Assuming you have Python installed, all you need to do is open up a terminal. You just do pip install r requirements.txt. I chose not to go for a virtual environment in this case, just to simplify the setup a little bit. And if you are into AI engineering, you will find that you need these packages for a lot of different things. Basically, we just install a couple of standard packages like OpenAI, Fast API, and Python.env. So most users will really need all of these packages. And then what you can do is just run python app.py, and it will start up a development version of the server. So how do we call this server? Well, the interesting thing is I actually created a test script to give you many different examples of how you can use this particular server. In this code file, you can see that that endpoint that I showed you earlier is defined as the API URL, together with 3 models that I'm testing in my case, GPT-4o, DeepSeek R1, and 5.4. You can customize this to your liking, but do note that some models might require some changes to the actual server code because they might not be compatible with the OpenAI API. However, that's an advanced use case, so let's just assume you want to use one of those 3 models for now, and then we can have a look at how the test script works in more detail, right? So what it does is it sets up a payload. It sets up a simple test question. And if we check out what that question is, you can see that it is, what is the capital of France and why is it historically significant? Then, of course, we have a model selection. In this case, we're looping over all the models just to show you that it's very easy to switch models and you just need one GitHub token to have access to all of them. And then as the streams are coming in, so as those chunks are coming in from the AI model, it will eventually just print the content, and you will see this happening in my terminal when we actually start this test. To test the script, I'm going to go to my terminal here on the right and simply type python test py, knowing that my server is already running in the background. And you can see that first it calls GPT-4o, which is a pretty quick model. Then it calls DeepSeek R1, which starts again with that think token, which you could display in your UI in a specific way, but in this case, it's just going to be passed on completely. And then you actually also get 5.4 as an example. So you can already see that these models act very differently and respond in different ways. So you can really see the differences here and programmatically choose your favorite one. But I also want to teach you another very important aspect of all of this. Because remember at the beginning that I told you that this was a free offering? Well, this is true. This doesn't cost you anything. But eventually, once you've developed your application, you need to bring it to end users, right? And if you have a couple of users just testing out your application at once, you can even still rely on this free tier to some degree, but you will actually run into rate limits. So really, if you have your application ready to be shipped to your users, you want to move to Azure OpenAI. Let me illustrate why, because I also have a load test in this script. And this load test is going to execute many different requests at once. Specifically, it's going to launch 10 concurrent requests. That's a pretty decent load. You can imagine that you would have quite a few users hitting your application, but it's definitely not unrealistic. So I've been playing around with these free models a lot today, and now I'm going to show you why you will eventually hit rate limits and be unable to use this free tier anymore. So all I'm going to do in a terminal is run this python test py command again, and it's going to send those 10 concurrent requests. And you will see that in my case, all of these requests are going to fail. You can indeed see that all of them fail. So why is that the case? Well, the rate limits are of course quite strict, with this being a free service and all. If we check out the GitHub documentation, you can see that if you don't pay for Copilot at all, then you can only go up to 50 requests per day, and that's for models that have a high rate limit tier. Everything above that will require you to move to Azure OpenAI. Now, to properly learn how to migrate to Azure OpenAI and turn your development environment into a real production-grade environment, you can join my community in the link below. Additionally, the code that I showed you today is available in there as well, so you can get started with GitHub Models the right way.